"I've arranged it with the bank," my son said. "Your pension goes straight to me now. You don't need anything, just a corner to die in." He was at the kitchen island, hunched over his phone, thumbing through something more important than me. Justine didn't even pretend to hide her smirk. She leaned on the counter, sipping from the mug I bought last Christmas. I stood by the stove, holding a spoon frozen in place, like the stew I'd spent the morning reheating for them. The smell clung to the air, rich and familiar, but the words Tobias had just said tasted like ash in my mouth. I thought of all the ways I could respond. Ask him what he meant. Tell him I'm not done yet. Remind him whose name is still on the deed, but I didn't say a word. The chair scraped behind me as he stood up. "We'll need your account details by tomorrow." "Of course," I said quietly. He nodded once satisfied and walked off to the den, shoes thudding like punctuation. Later, after their lights dimmed and the house grew still, I made tea in the dark. I didn't bother turning on the overhead. I didn't want to see my reflection in the window. I opened the freezer, moved a few frozen bags aside, and cleared a space behind the vegetables and a half-eaten pie. It was cold, deep cold. I pressed my palm to the metal shelf, let it sting for a moment, then closed the door again. I slept on the cot beside the washer that night. Fully dressed coat zipped to my neck. The old water heater groaned behind me. I held the spoon in my hand like a relic. It had fed him when he was small. Now it fed the silence. In the morning, I sat at the kitchen table as Justine handed me an envelope. "For the bank," she said. I slid it into my coat pocket, but I didn't open it. I had somewhere else to be first. The day they moved in, Justine called my curtains dated. 3 weeks later, they were gone, replaced with something thin and scratchy that didn't block the morning glare. I used to rise early and open the blinds myself. Now I kept my eyes shut longer, trying to pretend the light wasn't someone else's decision. Tobias said it would be for a few months, just until their lease ended, and they got back on their feet. That was 3 years ago. Now my bedroom is a storage closet, and my bed is a fold-out cot beside the humming washer that kicks on every night. The photos from the hallway were boxed after Justine redecorated. My favorite chair, plaid and worn in just the right way, was sold on Facebook Marketplace without a word. I'd carved a little notch in its armrest counting stitches during those long nights after my husband passed. Gone. Like him. When I asked where it went, Justine shrugged. We needed space. They took my dog too. When I came home from my hospital stay, the leash was gone. Tucker's better off with a backyard, Tobias said. He needs more than this old place. I didn't argue. What would have been the point? I started walking differently, quieter, avoiding the creaky floorboard near the hall, stepping around their meal prep containers stacked like bricks. The stove, once warm with soup and stories, now had a post-it on it, "Do not use." But the laundry room still had one drawer they hadn't touched. Bottom left, under the old rags and rusted flashlight. That drawer was mine. Inside was a tin box. Nothing fancy, but it held things they didn't think mattered. Old things, quiet things. That morning, after slipping Justine's envelope into my coat, I waited for the sound of the garage door. When it opened and their car pulled out, I tiptoed to the drawer, turned the latch, and reached inside for the only thing that still belonged to me. The tin box was cool in my hands, lighter than I remembered, but still heavy with things they'd rather I didn't have. I sat on the laundry stool and opened it slowly, as if afraid even the air might give me away. Inside were my old military ID, a copy of my nursing license, the title to my car still legally mine, and tucked in the folded corner, the flash drive. I hadn't looked at it since Nathan gave it to me. Voice gravel soft, from chemo hands, already shaking. "Keep this," he said, pressing it into my palm. "Just in case the house turns mean after I go." I'd thought he meant grief. I locked the laundry door, pulled the laptop from its hiding spot behind the detergent bin, and waited for it to boot. It groaned, like it didn't want to remember either. The drive opened with a quiet chime. The first folder was marked Legal, 2017. Inside, scanned documents. My own durable power of attorney. Signed and witnessed. It was still active. No modifications. No legal transfer to Tobias. Nothing. Next folder bank. There were screenshots of forged documents, practice sheets where my signature had been copied line by line in different inks, different slants. Some were sloppy. Others were alarmingly close, but not close enough. And the last folder, photos. Justine hunched over a kitchen counter, copying from a checkbook. A post-it on the table said, Mom's signature in her handwriting. My mouth went dry. They weren't just waiting for my pension. They were building a case to take everything. I closed the laptop and set it gently back behind the bin. My knees popped as I stood joint stiff from age but spine straighter than it had been in weeks. I opened the tin box again and pulled out a small notepad tucked underneath the title paper. It was time to make a list, not of what they'd taken, but of what I still had left to use. The first thing I did was change my PIN. Not at home, not online. I walked to the bank in person, waited in line, smiled at the teller like I had all day. She offered me a chair, said it was rare to see someone from your generation handle things face to face. I told her I liked paper trails. Next, I asked for a temporary hold on the account, possible unusual activity. She didn't ask for details. She just nodded and clicked. By the time I got home, Justine was already pacing the kitchen. The transfer bounced, she said, voice tight. Did you touch something I don't recall? I answered softly. She stared at me. You don't recall? I blinked. Some days are like that. She called Tobias into the room. He didn't speak to me, just looked at Justine like she was the translator for a language he no longer cared to understand. That night at dinner, no one passed me the salad. No one asked how my day was. Justine threw my mail into the trash can. I didn't say a word. Because the next morning, I called the county clerk's office, asked for a certified copy of the property deed, mine, signed, and filed. And after that, I booked an appointment with a mobile notary for the following Tuesday. I requested a witness, too. I cleaned the counter, folded towels, washed dishes. I made everything look normal. Because in this house, silence was expected from me. They thought silence meant surrender. But silence is a powerful thing when you use it as cover. They underestimated the woman who once ran a trauma ward on back-to-back night shifts. The woman who knew when to speak and when to document. The woman who knew the difference between quiet and defeated. By the time they realized I wasn't confused, I already had the envelope. The one I'd be placing somewhere cold. The envelope made a soft thud when I sealed it. Inside the notarized letter from the bank confirming I was still in full control of my accounts. Printouts of the forged documents they'd submitted, signatures that didn't match mine. A certified copy of the deed with my name and my name alone. I triple-checked each page, then folded them carefully, pressed the air from the freezer bag, and slid it in. I wrapped it in foil, smoothing the edges like I used to with baked goods, and labeled it with a single word, Mom. Then I nestled it between two frozen chickens on the back shelf. It was fitting. They used to call me the Freezer Queen. I figured it was time I lived up to the title. That morning, Justine rummaged through the fridge looking for the oat milk. She opened the freezer, her hand hovering. Then she pulled back a foil-wrapped bundle. Her head tilted. What's this? Something I'm keeping cold? I said, not looking up from my tea. She didn't press. Just set it back and muttered something about reorganizing. But I noticed she slid it to the front before she closed the door. I made a mental note. Later that afternoon, Tobias came in from the garage, flustered and red in the face. He'd been calling the bank all morning trying to figure out why the automatic pension transfer failed again. He slammed a cabinet door and accused me of messing things up out of spite. I told him I'd been baking. He didn't believe me. But he didn't see the foil-wrapped file tucked behind the chicken either. Justine did. She lingered near the freezer twice that day, once pretending to clean, once looking for ice. She asked if I'd defrost something soon. I told her it wasn't ready yet. By evening, I knew it was only a matter of time. And when Tobias opened that freezer, the trap would spring. It was still early when it happened. The heater hadn't kicked on yet, and the house held that dense kind of silence only winter brings. I sat in the back room tea, warming my palms, listening to the rhythm of the washer churning its rinse cycle. Then the freezer door slammed. A beat of silence. Then a thud, and Tobias's voice cut through the air. "What the hell is this?" I stood, tucked my hands into my sleeves, and walked toward the kitchen. Not hurried, just steady. He stood over the counterfoil and plastic, peeled halfway back, papers spread like torn wings. "That's yours," I said. He didn't respond at first. His fingers shook as he flipped through the pages, eyes darting from stamp to signature. He read the bank's letter, lips parting, as he traced the words that confirmed I'd never transferred power of attorney. He read the notary seal, then the deed, my name, clear and singular. Then he found the highlighted paragraph. The one that stated forgery of financial documents carried both civil and criminal penalties. His knees almost buckled. "What is this?" he asked again, but quieter now, like he was hoping the words would shift if he whispered. "You've seen it," I said gently. "Now you know." He looked up at me, no longer angry, just stunned. His mouth opened like he might argue, but all that came out was a sound. Not one scream. Several. Choppy, panicked, raw. He screamed again. And again. It wasn't rage. It was recognition. That nothing in this house belonged to him. Not the pension. Not the deed. Not the future he thought he'd already cashed. Justine came running in, eyes wide. "What's happening?" she asked. But he couldn't speak. He just pointed at the papers like they were on fire. I turned back toward the laundry room, picked up my coat, and zipped it to my chin. By the time the kettle finished boiling, I had called a car. I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave a note. I simply picked up my bag and walked outside. The cab was waiting at the end of the street, just as I'd arranged 3 days earlier. Tobias's voice still echoed from the kitchen, raw, frantic, desperate. Justine's sharper, shriller. They were trying to patch a sinking boat with bare hands. I didn't look back. Downtown, my lawyer was already waiting. I placed the original documents on his desk, deed letters, notarized proof. He flipped through them, nodding slowly. "You waited just long enough," he said. Eyes kind, but focused. We signed what needed signing. By noon, the pension account was locked down under my authority only. The county clerk confirmed the property title with a fresh digital stamp in my name. The restraining order paperwork was submitted, notarized, and marked urgent. Tobias and Justine wouldn't be able to step foot near me or the house. Back at the old place, I imagined the panic setting in. The locks would have already been changed by the company my lawyer arranged. The alarm code knew. The cameras on. They'd scream, they'd accuse, they'd lie. But they wouldn't get in. The truth is, they never asked where I'd go. They thought I had nowhere. They thought all I had was that cot next to the washer, that spoon in the drawer, that fading memory of what the house used to be. They were wrong. Marilyn picked me up that afternoon. She was my old charge nurse, long retired like me, now living alone in a 2-bedroom cottage outside town. "You sure?" she asked, opening the door. I nodded once. "It's just for a while." I unpacked slowly. A change of clothes, my notepad, my tea tin. Enough to feel human again. By nightfall, my name was safe. My accounts were safe. My body was safe. They could scream all they wanted. But I had finally stepped outside the walls they tried to bury me in. Marilyn's spare room had a twin bed, a small dresser, and a patchwork quilt that didn't match anything else, and I loved it for that. The walls were pale, and the curtains were soft, the kind that let light in without glare. There were no reminders taped to the fridge, no demands scribbled on whiteboards, just a welcome note folded on the pillow. "You're safe here." Her house smelled like thyme and fresh coffee. We didn't talk much that first evening. She made soup. I washed the bowls. We moved like nurses do, quietly, efficiently, with a respect for silence born from years of walking hospital corridors. I slept the whole night through. No washer humming, no distant arguing. When I woke, I lay still, listening to birds outside. I took a deep breath and held it a moment before letting it go. That's what safety feels like. It fills you slowly without asking for permission. By noon, Tobias had left 12 voicemails. The first few were angry. The middle ones were confused. The last 3 sounded like a man unraveling. Justine tried logging into my bank account. My lawyer called to let me know the attempt had triggered a fraud alert. He'd flagged the IP and submitted a report. I didn't flinch. They were scrambling now, trying to understand the shift in power. They always thought I clung to the past. What they never understood was that my past made me dangerous. Hospitals taught me how to keep records. Nursing taught me how to wait. Marriage taught me how to listen without reacting. And widowhood taught me how to live with silence. Their silence now filled the space where control used to sit. They didn't call again that night. Marilyn made chamomile tea, and we watched something quiet on television, neither of us really paying attention. My phone stayed face down on the table. I wasn't waiting for anything. I was finally letting things pass. 2 months passed, and I never stepped foot back into that house. I didn't need to. Everything I wanted had already been removed quietly, legally, completely. The listing went live on a Tuesday. 3 bedrooms, updated plumbing, well-maintained foundation. The photos didn't show the cot in the laundry room or the post-it notes that once dictated my movement. They didn't need to. I signed the realtor's papers from Marilyn's kitchen table. She poured coffee while I initialed the final lines. By Friday, the first showing was scheduled. Tobias and Justine didn't know until they pulled up that morning and saw the sign in the yard. Open house, Saturday, 11 to 3. The realtor was unlocking the door when they arrived. "Where's my stuff?" Tobias demanded, voice already rising. "In storage," the realtor said calmly. "Owner's orders." They had nothing to threaten her with. Their names were nowhere on the deed. No lease, no claim. Just years of entitlement they assumed was permanent. They left without entering. Justine tried to shout something down the sidewalk, but the wind carried it away. The new buyer didn't ask questions. She toured the space, nodded approvingly, and wrote a check that cleared by Monday. I didn't celebrate. I wrote another check instead. This one made out to a local nonprofit that helped displaced women find transitional housing. With their help, I set up something Tobias would never see coming. A quiet co-op. One home, then another. Shared kitchens, private rooms, quiet gardens. For women like me. Women who'd been pushed out, talked over, rearranged until they no longer recognized their own lives. It wasn't about revenge. Revenge feeds on pain. Freedom grows in peace. Marilyn helped paint the mailbox at the first location. It was yellow, bright and soft, like a thing that didn't need permission to be noticed. And as I folded the last moving receipt into my file, I realized something simple and sharp. The house that broke me had just built something better. I live in a house where the quiet feels clean, where the mail has my name on it, and the bills do too, where no one rewrites my schedule or rewires my memories. The mornings are my own again. I wake when I want to. I brew coffee in a pot. I pour it into a chipped mug I like, and drink it while the sun moves across the wall. No one asks what's for dinner. No one hides my letters or checks my account balance. The freezer is just a freezer now. Peas, soup, a pie? I'll probably forget about. No more foil-wrapped truths, no more frozen warnings. I keep food there, nothing else. Sometimes when I'm washing dishes or trimming the garden, I remember the sound Tobias made, that first scream, sharp and startled, echoing through the kitchen. I don't hear it with bitterness. I hear it the way you remember the snap of a breaking branch on a night hike, sudden, jarring, but necessary to know where you are. It was the moment everything stopped pretending. The moment I realized I hadn't failed him by saying no. I had succeeded in remembering who I was. They thought control was something you demand, but real control is quieter. It lives in the decisions no one sees, like making that first phone call, changing the PIN, booking the cab, closing the freezer door. I think of the drawer I once called mine, the only corner they didn't touch. Now every drawer in this house is mine, and none of them hold fear. Marilyn stops by often. We sit in the backyard and prune the basil. Some of the women from the co-op drop in too. They bring stories, sometimes casseroles, always strength. I don't need a crowd. I just needed space. Space to rebuild, to rest, to remember. Because I didn't escape the house. I reclaimed something larger. I walked out before they could teach me how to disappear.